Hey everyone, welcome back to Ridge Talk. Today we got the usual cast of characters with us. We've got Pastor Justin, Sean, myself, and today we're going to be answering questions that nobody's asked. So again, this is a good reminder that this is an opportunity for people. By the way, we're not chastising anyone. If you're listening, we're so glad you're listening. But this is an opportunity to hear feedback from our people here at Southridge and also for us to respond. And so if ever you have questions, you can call or text the number on the screen or also send us an email, and we'll respond to your questions that way.
See, I would say that we're answering the questions that people have but haven't asked.
See, that's an even better. That's a good observation, Justin. Yeah. I appreciate that. Here's the deal. I honestly believe that Ridge Talk is not just a way for us to communicate with the people and answer pressing questions. It's an opportunity for us to talk about things that are near and dear to us and things that we think are formation issues. We really do believe that we have a mission to see people grow and become disciples of Jesus Christ, to grow to maturity in Christ, and so we just have an opportunity to talk about some of those things that shape us and form us. Honestly, as we were talking ahead of this, there's kind of a weightiness and a heaviness kind of in our world at the moment. A lot of things going on, a lot of difficult conversations that we could be having. And so we want to talk about not what those things are and not comment. This is not a commentary on those things that are going on in the world. We thought it might be helpful to talk about how we navigate conversations that are difficult. And so one of the things that Justin brought up as part of the is that part of the emotionally healthy relationships questions, Justin?
Yeah. So the end of the emotionally healthy relationships course put together by Peter Scazzaro over a number of years. I'm currently facilitating it, but at the end of the course, there's just 15 kind of marks of what does it look like to be an emotionally mature Christian. And I've shared these 15 things with all of our community group leaders and Bible study leaders and all of that. And I just like to put them out there to our leaders on a regular basis so that we can continue to focus in on what's important. But one of the statements on the list on this topic is, I can state my own beliefs and values without becoming adversarial. That is a very important mark of what it looks like to be an emotionally mature Christian. I can communicate my own beliefs and values without becoming adversarial.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing for us to consider these days. I mean, it's the same sentiments we see in Paul's letter to the Ephesians chapter 4. And literally, he says, rather than doing all these things, he says, speaking the truth in love, we grow up in every way into Christ. And so one of the ways that we grow in community with one another is that we are able to speak the truth in love. We're able to communicate our beliefs and our values without becoming adversarial. And so I kind of just want to toss it out there and say, well, what are some of the presuppositions you might have to have? What are some of the foundational things that you have to work through in order to do that? I guess the shorter version of that is, how do you do that? How do you speak and communicate your values and your beliefs without becoming adversarial?
Yeah, I'm sure Sean has something to say to this as well. But, step one, you have to know what your beliefs and your values are. And, that sounds like a very simple statement, but I think that when people really dig down to, okay, just at the very core, what are the two or maybe three things that are absolutely essential values in my life? What are those? And then what steps do I take to live those out? I don't know how many people have really done that real deep introspection work within themselves to identify, hey, these are the two or three really deep, high values that I have that I want to live out.
I would imagine most people don't start, like if you're having a difficult conversation or there's something going on out in the world that you've got opinions about or even beliefs about, I'm sure most people don't start with, well, I value this, therefore I believe this thing. They start at the level of, I this is my belief, or this is my opinion, or this is what's true, or whatever that thing is. But that doesn't take into account, what is my value in even communicating what I'm communicating right now? I think that's right. I think it does require some below the surface work.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mind's going a few different directions on this. the most immediate thing that came to mind was thinking about this book that we've been reading. So we have a Christian leadership course that several of our members are a part of. And we've been in a book recently by Tim Keller, and it's really about preaching. But one of the general ideas that you can kind of pull away from it if you make a composite of several ideas that he presents is you have to be somebody who knows Jesus and spends enough time with Jesus that when you're communicating about Jesus, that it's coming from a place of authentic relationship with him, and it's a part of you and not just ideas that you're presenting. And then one of the examples that he gave, and one that I see that maybe kind of fits this, is when Paul went to Mars Hill. What book was that? It was in Acts, right? Yeah. He goes to Mars Hill, goes into this temple where there are all these different gods being worshipped, and he doesn't approach the conversation with the people there by beginning with much of what they believe and why it's incorrect. He kind of like observes the ideas and already goes into that. Like, he already knows some of the gods that they're worshiping and what the values behind that are. And he goes in and he presents a case for, hey, you've got this idol over here to this unknown God. Let me show you how the God that I serve actually presents a better
The alternative or way.
Yeah, way of these values that you want to see in the world. He doesn't start with attacking, here's why your ideas are wrong. He doesn't go in that adversarial way. So putting all that together, it's, to me, the thing that makes the most sense is you have to know what your values are. For us, that stems from what we know about Jesus, what we believe about our faith, right? That's the foundation. That grows through personal relationship with Jesus, spending time with Jesus, getting to know him and his character more through prayer, through reading the word, through listening, all of those types of things. And then going out into the world and kind of listening there first as well, like seeking to understand the world around you, the people around you, the belief systems that are there, all of that. It's really hard, I think, sometimes to express your own beliefs and not default into an us versus them. If you don't really understand yourself or understand the other people or the other worldviews that you're encountering. And Tim Keller, one of the most compelling things that he has said in multiple interviews and books and things that I've read is that he really came to the end of his life to believe that the best approach was to seek to understand the world around you and to present a better why to them. Understand what the values they're trying to uphold, and that the attempts that you see in culture are attempts at upholding certain values. And we would likely agree with the values that underlay those approaches. So like human rights, different things like that. We may not agree on the method to get there or the worldview for what that means, but we would all agree that the value of human beings
like
are valuable.
Justice,
something like that. It matters, right? And so it's like coming into a conversation where you can present why Jesus is the better why to those types of things. That's really the main thing that I can kind of come up with.
Man, that's so good. Point. And that first part I would summarize as saying, if you need to spend so much time with Jesus that when you communicate about Jesus, you need to sound like Jesus.
Yeah,
right?
And I think his framework too was not just you're not just throwing facts at people. You're giving them yourself, and in giving them yourself, they're seeing that you not only really believe what you're saying, but that you are actually living that out.
The other thing you're talking about there, especially with regards to how do you speak to the culture, or how do you speak in a culturally savvy way, and just that idea of knowing what you believe, but also exploring other viewpoints and listening. I think that is something we could talk about over and over and over again, and it wouldn't be enough still. Because I think there is a way to mishear that as relativism, right? That, well, you don't really, I believe my thing, but other people believe their thing. And so the goal is for us to come together and just get along. And there is no truth. But we reject that, right? As Christians who believe the Bible, who believe that Jesus is the source and center of all truth, we believe that absolute truth does exist and that it's discoverable. What I think a lot of what you're talking about, and even more of some stuff that we talked about ahead of this, is not at all talking about or promoting relativism, but empathy. That it's so important for you to do the work of really understanding what is my belief, what is their belief, or all the different beliefs. What are the values that I have beneath those? What are the values they have beneath those? Is there a place where I could be wrong about that? Like, what is my evidence that my thing is the reason I believe the thing is I believe is what it is? You don't know, and that can sound disheartening because it feels like you're always being discerning. But that's kind of what we're called to, right? Aren't we supposed to be discerning? Isn't that a big aspect of wisdom? Is that we're truly trying to listen and learn and grow always. We never stop growing or trying to be empathetic towards other people.
Yeah, and I don't think most of us are wired to really care what somebody else has to say if we don't feel like they're listening to us. So we have to extend the same thing the other way. I mean, that's just
and we need to be proactive. As people who love Jesus, we need to be proactive and not wait for them to be empathetic toward us until we're empathetic toward them. I think because that's how Jesus is. Jesus is the one who moves near to us when we were not moving near to him.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for us to do the same, to move toward people we don't necessarily agree with, or we may not understand, but it's so, I think, important to have that understanding before you're even doing the communicating. And I think so. That's the second part of that, right? That the value is, or the idea is that what it looks like to be mature is that we can communicate or articulate our beliefs and our values without being, what was the word?
Adversarial.
Yeah. And so
I would posit that the first step of good communication without becoming adversarial is good active listening.
Oh yeah.
I think it starts with listening and more responding than it is necessarily, if you're looking for effectiveness, like you said, it's in listening that we do find empathy for people. It's in listening that we do find the ability to be compassionate so that when we speak, we're not being adversarial.
So there are really two parts to that. One is we actually have to know what we believe and what we value before we start talking.
Sure.
Don't just hit share on this trope that you think you're supposed to, believe, or you think you believe. Really do the work of why do I believe this? But then the second part of it is how do I communicate that well? And what I just heard you say is the first step in that aspect of it is listening.
Yeah, it's like speaking is almost the third thing, right? Before you speak, know what you really believe and hold dear and value. Before you speak, try to understand what somebody else believes and values, and then speak.
Well, I think that's so disarming too. I think, in my mind, disarming is kind of working at that not being adversarial, right? That how do you approach listening and then even stating your beliefs or values once you know them and once you know what the other person believes? How do you do that in such a way that you're not adversarial? Boy, I think starting with a place of humility and seeking common ground. And so walking into it like, hey, help me understand what you believe and why you believe it.
Yeah.
Like just that question. So that's not reactive, that's proactive. I am proactively coming to you with a question, but then I'm listening. Now my posture is one of listening and genuinely active listening, like trying to understand, not to respond, but to understand.
And I think there's two questions that I hear from people through the years on this. It's, hey, I've done the deep work. I know what it is that I believe. I have taken the opportunity to actively listen. I'm doing the very best that I can at showing empathy toward this other person. I believe I'm communicating in a healthy way and articulating, communicating my beliefs and values in a good way. But the other person I'm talking to, they're becoming adversarial. Now what? And, the answer to that question is, hey, that's not a reflection of you. If you're communicating well, if you're communicating in a healthy way and somebody responds in an unhealthy way, that's a reflection of them, not of you. And at some point in time, you're okay to just take a step back and back away from the conversation if the other person can't have it in a non-adversarial way.
Yeah, you can lovingly disengage there. And I think if you look at how conflict resolution works, whether it's like couples counseling or other types of conflict resolution, the way that like if you're already to conflict, so then you're like reverse engineering that, right? We're trying to avoid getting to conflict, right? But I think if we reverse engineer this, you can sort of see like the steps to maybe avoid conflict in the first place. You get to that point, you're in a conflict, you're in the room with like a third party who's trying to mediate. Oftentimes an exercise that they'll do is they'll have one person start, okay, state what's going on here. And then they turn to the other person and they say, okay, state what they just said. What did you hear? It's a practice of listening and being able to, you cannot start to resolve a conflict until you've actually heard the person. And so how do we preempt that a little bit? We start by trying to hear the person.
And sometimes people hear something that the other person didn't say.
Yeah.
You mentioned couples counseling. I've worked with couples through the years, and this isn't a specific example. It's just kind of an example of the kind of thing that happens in those conversations. Spouse A will say something like, it would just be helpful if you could help with dishes after dinner, or help get the kids bathed, or read them a story before bed. Like, that would be helpful. Go to spouse B. Okay, what did you hear them say? They said that I'm lazy, that I don't do enough.
Yeah, I never do the dishes.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, let's take a step back. They didn't say that at all.
Yeah.
So let's rewind back. What did you actually hear the other person say?
And that's hard because sometimes that is what the person means. Right, it is coded language.
If they are being passive aggressive,
right? There can be coded language, and so, but the active listening is the idea behind that exercise is to make you say what you're actually feeling.
Yeah, and I think there's something to somebody else having to articulate the other person's point of view. That works from that micro scale in a one-to-one relationship, and I think it can work fairly well on the broad scale when it comes to large issues. Being able to articulate that perspective shows that there's an understanding there, and then it's less so I'm going to try to tear this down. It's more like I said, trying to see how maybe from a Christian worldview, there's a different way.
Well, yeah. And I think this is interesting, talking about reverse engineering it. So the statement is, I can articulate my beliefs in a way that's not adversarial. Well, now we're talking about conflict resolution, which is kind of reverse engineering. What do I do going backwards?
I took us down a rabbit hole.
No, you're good, because I'm about to take us the other direction, which is there something I can do before this? And there is a question that you can ask, and that question is, do I need to state my beliefs?
Right. Yeah.
The reality is you never have to be accountable for things you didn't say.
Yeah.
You don't have to be accountable for things you didn't do. And so I think we live in a cultural moment in which you may have heard this before. Silence is violence, right? Not saying something is actually saying something.
Yeah.
And that I dismiss out of hand. That's not true. That's not true. There may be moments, very specific moments, where that is true, but that is not a good general rule. In fact, if you look at the wisdom literature, it's the people who hold their tongues that are perceived as wise. And it's the people who are loud and arrogant, and Scripture calls them babbling brooks. There's always something pouring out of their mouth. Those are the people who are always getting into trouble. And so I think even just asking yourself the question, I know what I believe and I know what my values are. Is it important for me to share that in this moment or with this person or on this platform? Like, that's a great preliminary question before it even gets into the other stuff.
And even some of the, what's my motive behind wanting to do that? Because I know for me, even in this setting, sometimes I just want to say something because I want people to think I'm smart or that I have something to say, like
You are
something smart to say, right? It's not, or in that moment, I am trying to win. I'm not really trying to win that person over. I'm trying to win and settle a debate or whatever.
That's right.
Like, there's so many things that I think that you have to be self-aware enough to go, okay, why am I feeling compelled to state my belief here, my point of view here?
Well, exactly. And I don't know why I'm thinking there's a lot going on in the world right now, and so you see a lot of things on social media. But
It's a dumpster fire.
It can be a dumpster fire. It usually is. But I think there's a cultural phenomenon that says, because I have a platform, I therefore have a voice, and because I have a voice, I am culturally obligated to be properly outraged.
Yeah.
Or I have to have an opinion and state it so that people know, like, or else why do I have this platform? Why do I have this voice? It's going to waste.
Yeah, I mean, that extends to even less serious things. Like, have you ever been, since the advent of social media, have you ever been out doing something, like you're hanging out with your wife, you're having a good day, and you're taking a couple pictures, and you feel almost that compulsion to have to share that, or have to artificially like create some scenario that you can take a picture of and share with the world? There's a weird element to the access and the platform that this gives us, where sometimes it's almost like this semi-conscious compulsive thing where I need to,
it's an extension of me and my life
or something out there. And I think that extends to opinions, to beliefs, to weighing in on the latest cultural matter. Again, I don't want people to hear us say always be quiet and never speak up.
Correct.
It's just, if you're speaking up and spouting off an opinion about everything, like when statuses started to become a thing, and it was like people started to realize that you could post, I just had a peanut butter sandwich for lunch, and then the next post could be like, my grandma just died. Like that, there was equal weight in that little status bar to both of those things, yet those things are not equal
in life experience.
And it's just this weird world that we now inhabit, where it's like, if you're just creating noise, it's like when you do have something profound or good to say, it may not matter because there's just so much other chatter going on.
Imagine how social media would change if people only posted something about their core beliefs and values only.
It would still be the same. It would still be crazy. Hey, I actually think this has been a really good conversation. Do you guys have any more to share on this topic?
So, I mean, the topic is, you have to know your beliefs.
Right.
You have to know what your deep values are. You have to know what your deep convictions are. You need to listen to the other person, listen really well, and then you can speak. And one other thought that I have is that, as followers of Jesus, we have to be consistent in what we speak about our value. And so example here, and I won't get like a real specific example, but like you get into politics or something like that. You can have a specific value in mind, and you see politician in this party break that value, and you go on social media and you rant, and I can't believe this person did this, and then somebody in your party does the exact same thing, and you're like, well, that's different over here, and here's all the reasons why that's different.
Justifying.
You're justifying it, and it's like, no, if the value is here and the value is what I most believe, it doesn't matter what political party the person's in. I have to be consistent in holding up this value in all situations, in all scenarios. And I think that's why people struggle to really drill down to what are my values that I have to be consistent in all things, because it is hard. It's really hard work to get there, and then to say, oh, If I really believe this, that means it's difficult. It's really difficult to live out. I'll just say this, one of the best exercises I did on just identifying your core values, it came from Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead, which she wrote for businesses and how to create a good culture in the workplace. But she has an exercise where it's like, you got 100 different words on the page: faith, family, peace, just, joy, 100 different things. And it's like, through the exercise, you have to narrow it down to just one or two of these things. And then you have to write out bullet points as to how do I live this out. And it's a really challenging exercise to walk through because you're like, oh man, family is really important to me, but family might fall under the faith category too. So maybe I'll scratch family out and circle faith. And, she outlined like, hey, faith is one of my core values. And here's how I live that out. Bullet point 1, I see the face of God in everyone. Wow. Every person that you interact with, I see the face of God. That was one of her values that she tried to live out. But I just think when you go through this exercise, when you really drill down to these are my beliefs, this is what I value, and I'm going to, here's 3 statements as to how I'm going to live it out every day, you're going to discover that it's not easy to live out of that. I think it would change. I disagree with you. I think social media would be so much better if people actually did that internal work and was like, you know what? I'm only going to post about things that really matter most to me. I think that would change a lot.
It'd be amazing to see that world. So... Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us today on Ridge Talk. As always, you can click to subscribe and share any of these videos that we post. But remember, leave us questions so we can answer those questions. We'll see you next time on Ridge Talk.